Hello everybody, Mark Schaftlein with you, and this is the Schaftlein Report. It's Tuesday's edition, and we are broadcasting from Irvine, California, and from the great Midwest, Chicago, Illinois. Tom Amenta, welcome back to the show. Happy to have you with me today.
Glad to be with you as always. Although next time, man, you got to give me the memo. If you're going to go all pink like that, I'll make sure it happens too. Like you hook a brother up.
Well, you know, it's really interesting. I mean, there's a never-ending flow of stuff to talk about, Tom. I mean, let's get to some of the hard news first, and then we're going to get into some of the politics of it. Listen, what was a tropical depression a few days ago is now a Category 1 hurricane. It looks, and I say looks, folks, because I've experienced dozens of these storms being down in Florida, like it's trending north of Tampa to hit somewhere what they call the Big Bend area. There's good news and bad news there. The good news is it is not a heavily populated area. Okay, it's the least populated area really in the state. However, if it takes a turn to the right, it could go into Tampa. If it turns more north, it could go into the Panhandle. Both of those are fairly populated areas. So, Tom, here's the big effect, and I've experienced this personally because of my various interests in the state of Florida. We already have an insurance market problem in Florida. I mean, after what happened last year, it's really tough actually to get insurance in the state of Florida. And there's stories we hear about people that can't afford it, that if their home is free and clear, they're just risking it, not even paying for it. Tom, that's, we can talk the politics of it in a little bit, but just from an impact on people, even though this is headed for a relatively smaller populated area, it's still, he's got roughly half the state declaring a state of emergency.
Yeah, and the thing too is that because I lived on the East Coast, I lived in Durham, North Carolina for 12 years, so it's like we never quite got it the way that people would in Florida, for sure, but went through it enough to also like have to understand a little bit about the weather. And the thing that's crazy about this is that the western side of the state of Florida usually doesn't get hit. It's usually down at Miami area, it's down in the Keys, it's moving up the East Coast. So it's like the fact that this is another one of those back-to-back severe storms, last year with Ian and this one. That's the thing to me that I hope it misses Tampa, because if Tampa still hasn't fully recovered from Ian last year, at least is my understanding, when it comes to, like you said, the insurance claims, the rebuilding, the whole 9 yards, and like to just get smashed again would be crazy. And then they're even less prepared up in that Destin Panhandle, tourist, sort of tourist trap section of the state, right? So I really. Yeah, I think it's crazy, and I'm really hoping that it does end up where it's going to go, and then it's already not going to be good, period. But hopefully it won't be catastrophic.
Right. Yeah. That's our best wish too. But we'll keep an eye on that. It's probably likely going to hit sometime tomorrow. But there is implications for the property insurance market. Because it's already tough in the state of Florida. Most companies, a lot of them have pulled out of the state. And there's Citizens Insurance. They write a lot of the policies now. So we'll keep an eye on that. Something we can't control. One thing that we can control is talking about politics, Tom. And boy, Biden's age is really surfacing again. I mean, poll after poll now, 72% of Americans feel he's too old to be president. I'm sitting here looking at these polls, and I'm going, well. Okay, 72%, he's too old. All right, 53% say they'll never vote for Trump. And yet, that's where we're headed again right now. We had the first debate. I've seen the post-debate polls. Trump's up minimum 30 points a state. I mean, I've seen some of the jockeying among all the candidates. Vivek's up, DeSantis is up a little bit. But aggregately, I haven't seen anything. I mean, DeSantis maybe moved a point. Trump's up 30 on him. So Tom,
welcome to the pain of being in the middle, my guy. Because like this is what we people that are the moderates that just look at it just keep getting twitchy. Because look, also Trump's 72. It's not like Trump's some spring chicken. Not 72 and 77 matters a lot. I want to be clear, but it's like he's on the older end too. It's just look, no one likes Joe Biden. No one. His own party doesn't like Joe Biden.
Right.
And the age thing, it's like, look, I know he has a speech impediment, and I know he's had to work hard on that. I was trying to be fair to that, but like, there's still a very, even inside of understanding that if he gets a little flustered, it can take him a little longer to like get his words because of that. He is still cognitively declining, and it is unbelievably clear. Like, this is the more that I watch him, and the more that I'm starting to pay attention, this is starting to feel more and more like something you and I talked about with John Fetterman. And it's like, look, I was maybe the worst critic Oz could have ever possibly had on this show for the entire time in that cycle, right? Like, I never missed a chance to smash him. But the minute that stroke happened, what did I say? I'm like, guess what? Fetterman's disqualified.
Yeah.
It's not about what I like. It's not what about I don't like. It's about what is best and who can do the job. And I'm not quite there with Biden yet, but I'm getting close.
Well,
and then on the flip side of the coin, it's like, oh, then I got to deal with Trump. Like, I don't know if there's something worse than an F minus, but they've both been there for a while, and it just seems to be getting worse for me.
It's an interesting contrast, though. For whatever you feel about Trump, and I know there's proactive Trumps and there's super anti-Trump, but no one accuses him of being in cognitive decline. I mean, they may think he's a little crazy and doing some of the stuff he's doing, but no one accuses him of mentally slowing down. And I'm going to even contrast Joe Biden with Bernie Sanders. I saw a Bernie Sanders interview over the weekend on Meet the Press. Sanders, again, I don't agree with hardly anything he says, but he is cognitively there. I mean, you don't have to worry about, his position on something. I mean, he clearly spells it out just like Trump does. Joe Biden doesn't have a position on anything. I mean, is basically his staff tells him everything he has to do. And it's really, I mean, here's the thing I don't get, all right? His job approval rating is, boy, it's like a flat line. I mean, 42% approved, 53% disapproved. That number, Tom, that number hasn't moved a point in 6 months. Right track, wrong track in the country. 25% were on the right track, 65% were on the wrong track. That's another flat line. Those numbers don't change.
Yeah, and maybe this is just my perspective in the spectrum and in looking at this. I think that those polls and the fact that they are so stable, and I want to emphasize so stable, I think it's a reflection of just the general frustration that people, because like we've talked about this, we might lean one way or another as a nation, but most people are pretty moderate, right? They're pretty much centrist what they lean. I think that those polls are, and their stability is a genuine reflection of the majority's Nixon's so-called silent majority's frustration with the greater state of play at this point. Well, it's like, do I have and I've said this so many times on this show, but I'll say it again. Do I have a massive problem with Joe Biden? Hell yes, I do. Will I continue to have a problem with Joe Biden? Heck yes, I will. Do I have a massive problem with Donald Trump? Yes, I do. Will I continue to have a massive problem with Donald Trump? Yes, I will. And when people like me see the moron that Biden is, in my opinion, and the moron that Trump is, who's genuinely, despite all of this other stuff, besides, the trial date, all of this is still, like you said, 30 points ahead. Like, I think that those polls and their steadiness is a real reflection of the general frustration of that, more centrist majority and less of a reflection than, I want to be really clear, one or the other, right? Like, I mean, Biden hasn't done a great job. I understand that his personal polling numbers are down, but just that right track, wrong track, I think is just indicative of the net issue and the net problem that we see here in the United States. And what's so frustrating is that neither side seems to want to try and like look at that and go, oh, this is really a problem. They just keep yelling at the other side saying, oh, it's your problem. And it's not. It's both. And both sides need to find a way to change that.
Well, I concur with you. And it's really interesting. I mean, you are right, Tom. Roughly 20% of the far right is behind Trump. 20% of the far left is behind Biden. There is 60% in the middle that are either probably 20% really dead middle, 20% lean sort of center right, and 20% center left. I mean, that's a large swath of persuadable voters.
Correct.
However it plays itself out. Well, again, long way to go, but boy, I got to tell you, not a lot's changing, and
no,
and we're seeing that. And again, Biden tells another whopper yesterday. I mean, him talking about the fact that he influenced Strom Thurmond's civil rights vote. That's just a flat-out lie. I mean, Biden was 21 years old. Strom Thurmond was a crusty old senator who used to be a Democrat turned Republican. I mean, when he says stupid stuff like this, it reinforces the cognitive decline point. I mean, falling asleep in Hawaii, making references to his Corvette. The ground's really hot over here. I did this with Strom. I mean, even his own staff have to be cringing at this. And look, you cannot hide the fact the man, if elected, would be 82 when he's sworn in. And I hear this comment, Tom, from left liberals and conservatives. Can't we do any better in this country than a geriatric 82-year-old guy? And then again, for those that don't love Donald Trump, which is 53% of Americans, can't the Republicans do any better than that? I mean, it's echo.
And that's the thing. Yeah, and like the other thing about Biden, like, look, people have had this. I saw this article and I thought it was really kind of interesting. It's like, when is talking about age not being ageist? And I know that ageist could be one of those like far left, super in your feels things to some people. But I think that age does not necessarily or automatically disqualify someone from doing something.
Right.
However, it can play a role. And like the one that I'll use that is so crystal clear, that is so undebatable, that even my friends at the farthest of the left are like, yeah, we really wish they would go, is Dianne Feinstein. Like, she is not a functional representative of government, period. I don't care how you feel about her.
Right.
I don't like it. She is incapable of doing the job, and she is showing it consistently. They have to drag her up to the Senate, the Senate Judiciary Committee just to get all the judges through. Like, it's a massive problem for the Dems, and she won't leave. We are risking that if Biden is elected. Now, again, like, look, I say it all the time, like, don't confuse me giving this point up for the people on the super party, like, no, Trump sucks too. You're not picking the right guy if you're primarying for him. I said what I said. I meant it. But can you imagine, like, as for all the problems that Trump has, and we've talked about those a lot more than Biden, can you imagine having essentially who Ronald Reagan was in the last 2 years of his presidency when the Alzheimer got him? Like, at least we had H.W. Bush, right? At least we had Jimmy Baker. Like, these, and at least we had still this perception in American politics of they still crossed the aisle, right? Like, they still knew that it was in everybody's best interest to play nice. They both knew that, like, they needed the Dems on some things. There was a sense of we're still in this together as a country.
Right.
Whereas, can you imagine if it comes out that Biden has Alzheimer's? We'll use the Reagan one. With 2 years left to go in a lame duck presidency, right?
They'll throw him over the bus and insert Kamala Harris quicker than you and I can blink.
Or what if they write it out? What if they Fetterman it?
Well,
I mean, really, like, what happens? What happens? Like, and you're gonna now you're gonna play the 14th Amendment. Like, there's all these things. You start going down this rabbit hole, and it's just like, it's dangerous. And we keep talking about these unprecedented times that we live in, and how we've never seen all of this, mostly surrounding Trump and his indictments.
Right.
But we've also never seen willingly walk the lamb to the slaughter that the Dems seem like they were dead set and prepared to do with Biden. Right. Like, we didn't know enough, at least from everything I read in classes and talked to like longstanding GOP members. When they had Reagan run again, they really didn't understand how fast. They didn't understand enough about Alzheimer's to understand what it was doing to him and how fast he was going to go off the cliff. That is, I've heard this from enough people to say that I believe it, and I've read it in enough places I believe it. I'll give you that one. Okay, we know exactly what's going to happen if this happens to Biden. We know exactly what happens if this cognitive decline that we all fear and this dementia that we think might be there, if it really is there, we know what this is going to do.
Yeah.
And that's my problem on that side of the aisle. Like, I have a huge problem with the GOP for not disqualifying Trump, for just risking this cataclysmic problem and as unpresidential as he is and trying to chase that. I have an equally large problem at this point that if that is happening on the left, like, well, you're leading America to the slaughter.
You're making the case for no labels, so we'll see how they end up. Joe Lieberman et al. End up playing out in that. Let me talk about another issue that it typifies what I believe Democrat. You mentioned about Democrats, Fetterman, Feinstein. I'll give you another one here. On what happened on the island of Maui, right away, just like you could set your watch to it. Senator Markey, Senator Durbin, couple wackos in the house. Oh yeah, it's climate change. That's what did it, climate change. Well, no, that wasn't what did it. It was actually a down power lines that Maui has confirmed that Hawaii Electric had responsibility for. Okay, that's actually been confirmed. Have you heard Markey or Durbin or anyone come out? Oh, well, we were wrong about that climate change thing related to this disaster. My point is, it doesn't matter whether it's a Fetterman, a Feinstein, or just a blatant lie they're peddling to the public.
So I'm going to go back on that one because from what I've seen is Hawaii Power has admitted that they had a down power line. Yeah. But what they claim, and they're suing Maui and they're suing the state of Hawaii over this, so they at least think that's something, is that was not what did it. That line wasn't what it is, that they fixed it, that whatever this is. So to the first point of how it started, I think that is still in dispute, and especially I want to be fair to that.
I will agree with you there. It still is
on
in
dispute. On the climate change versus look, this is where I actually in my day job I work in tech. Okay, I work for a tech company that one of the features and benefits that we have is inside of our software is the ability to calculate environmental impact to certain things in order to measure what some of these things can be. Okay, it's not up for debate anymore that the Earth's climate is in fact changing.
Agreed.
It's not open for debate. I'm sorry.
I agree.
Okay. Not so much for you, but just for anyone who wants. This isn't. It's not. I see this stuff every single day. However, and to your point, what I'm really rapidly getting sick of, especially sitting in this position that I do and having to sort of see this from a very from the level of trying to minimize these impacts, while also at the same time also trying to help these companies maximize returns and maximize profits, is that it's turned into this bludgeon, especially for the left, where it's like, well, see, you're the ones that are screwing up the planet, and if only wasn't you evil capitalists and your carbon emissions and all this other crap. It's like, at the end of the day, it's like, okay, cool. Let's just say you're right for a second. We'll give you that one for a minute. How do you make the world run? How do you?
The world runs on fossil fuels. It's what it does.
Right. And it runs on something even more. The Wu-Tang Clan said, "That's cash rules everything around me." Okay, this world runs on money. It runs on economic opportunity. It runs on energy. Why is China freaking out right now, and why do they continue to rattle the saber a little harder with Taiwan? If you're not paying attention, ladies and gentlemen, let me spell it out. Because every economic indicator for China is bad right now. And if it stays bad for the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, they're going to go from this integrated superpower that they bet their entire ability to be a superpower on their economic engine and their economic growth and their economic prominence in the world. And they're going to go back to potentially as far down as Russia is right now. Russia is an oil state. Russia is an oligarchical oil state. That is all they've got. Now, China probably won't slide quite that far, but it's like, why are they freaking out? Why are they trying to do these other things in the world? Because they know what this is going to look like if they either can't turn that around or they can't have a new thing in the world, okay? So I really don't want to hear it from that leftist contingent that wants to tell me about how every bad thing that's going on is directly related to the climate. And I also don't want to hear it over here on the far right where it's like, oh, no, it's not existing. It is happening. And if you don't acknowledge that it is happening and try to minimize it through the lens of how do we keep this, just not our economy at this point, but the world's economy still moving, well, we're going to go back to the Stone Age. It just depends on which ride you want to take. Wow. Okay, is it because we went to the Arctic freeze the way they're saying it is, or because we just melted down the entire financial system of the world? You can't do either. So let's kind of knock it off. And you're right. The Dems love to ride that, beat that cudgel of this climate thing when it's like, you guys are just not even attempting to look at what this actually is and the complexity of all of it.
Well, there's no question about that. And speaking of China, capital, Tom, is fleeing China. On the environmental stuff, you speak from someone who has the data on what's happening to temperatures, sea level. You see the data, okay? People can assess blame all they want. It is what it is. You're a data guy. You see what the data says. So you're not a climate alarmist. You're not a climate denier. You're just saying, hey, this is what the data says. Okay, now we can recognize the fact the United States is 5% of the world's population, And, we can implement every, damn climate thing in the world, but if China and India just thumb their nose at it, it's not going to make a hill of beans, one millionth of a centigrade difference in temperature. So, I mean, people can throw their arms up all they want and say, oh, the United States has to lead. No, they don't. No, you want to lead into the ground. That's what happened. Look at China right now. You brought it up. Yeah. China has a massive problem with capital leaving the country. Why is it
25% reduction year over year? If I looked at if the number that I saw is correct. Now they're really opaque, but that's a large enough. Someone calculated.
That's a big number, and really? it's going to get bigger. Why? And you ask, why is that capital leaving? Well, China's not having that fantastic growth numbers anymore. And I'll boil it down to a real simple answer. The reason they're not is they are lurching to the left. Xi Jinping is taking more interest for the public, meaning public investment in companies versus private. Companies are being moved to the left. They're being nationalized. And when people see this, and they see clearly a property bubble in China, it's been talked about for years, Tom. Now it's happening. Now it's happening.
Yep.
When you see Chinese banks lowering mortgage rates, lowering payments on depositors' money, you know you got a problem. When you're sitting here at youth unemployment estimates between 20 and 30%, we don't know the real number, that is a gigantic problem, okay? Again.
Well, forget the number. They stopped reporting it. Whatever propaganda garbage you want from the China, like this, how bad do you know? There's like, oh, we're not telling you guys anymore. Like there's nothing if you're paying attention to China from an economic outlook, to your point, because you and I could do hours on this. Between your background and my background, we can do hours on this. But to me, it's like everything there is bad, everything economically. And the really scary thing, especially to the people like you, the sharps that have been long seeing this coming, is that the next generation isn't in a position to fix it either. It's going to be worse with them. Maybe the generation after Gen Z might be able to do something, but the Gen Zs ain't doing anything in China, nor the millennials. Like they have the wave has not crested yet there.
Right.
And problematic.
Oh, it's hugely problematic. And so why are all these companies moving out of China? Because they're telling our Commerce Secretary, who, in my opinion, is one of the sharpest members of the Biden administration, Gina Raimondo.
Absolutely.
And she's saying, hey, their perception is there's a heck of a lot more risk in doing business in China now than there was before. If that risk is not identified, companies aren't stupid. Look, I just came back from Vietnam. I saw a country that was thriving. Why is Vietnam thriving? Yep. It's a communist government, but it's embraced capitalism. I saw capitalism all over the country. Okay?
Yeah.
China's going the opposite. I agree. They're going the opposite direction. They are embracing more communist than capitalist. And when you lurch to the left, as we are seeing in this country, bad things happen. Now, I'm not saying everything's perfect on capitalism. It's not. But it's a hell of a lot better than dealing with what we've seen. We've seen this time and time and time again. When governments lurch left, and you have a totalitarian government in China, bad things happen. And companies aren't stupid. They see this stuff happening, and they see, well, if I go to China, I have to follow this rule. I don't know how long my assets are going to be good. Can the government seize it? All of a sudden, the risk reward is it's too risky doing business here, and capital outflows happen. Well,
so I want to throw something at you, because especially like you and I've been doing this a while now, and we both understand and we have a lot of respect for each other. One of the things that I've been watching with the Trump rhetoric lately and everything, and I'm starting to wonder, is it that they're lurching left, or is it that they're lurching populist? Now, here's what I mean by that. Typically, the left has always said that they are the party, quote unquote, of the people, right? Of the working class, of the, with unions and all these other machinations of how do we get a groundswell of you're just everyday Joe, right? That like that's always seemed to be their thing. But what we've really seen in the past 10 years in American politics is the right try and sort of say that they are there for the every person. The attacks on the billionaires and the Clintons, for example, is just a great example of this. And when I look at Ping, when I look at the Biden administration right now, and honestly, I've got to be honest, the more I look at what Trump's playbook is I don't see a political spectrum thing so much as that old Roman watch it, like let them watch the gladiator fights, throw them bread, and this like we're going to maintain our power based on the populace, based on what the Romans eventually called the mob. And I'm starting to wonder, and again, this is like very sort of nascent in my thinking, is it necessarily that side of the aisle? I would agree historically it's skewed left, or is it more of that there's this intense populism going on sort of around the world, and that's really what's driving a lot of this, and that's ultimately what's going to be the crash. It's not purely a political ideology. You and I think we'd agree about a lot of left-leaning things on this, but I'm wondering if the thing that ultimately kills it all is when you overcorrect to this populist ideal, and I feel like we're seeing both sides attempt to claim that in the United States, and certainly Ping is doing that in China. Like, that's indisputable.
Well, I think on a macro basis, when you have an economy like we have in the United States, and that people talk about, hey, we got unemployment down to 3.5%. Okay, that's a good number. The job openings number came out today, and it was 8.8 million, down 800,000 from estimates, meaning that's still openings, but it's tightening a little bit. More and more companies are saying, hey, listen, this idea of you working from home is over. You're going to come to the office 3, 4, 5 days, pick your policy, and if you don't like it, you're not going to be part of the company. Amazon CEO came out and basically said that today. So now all of a sudden, Tom, I think we're seeing a shift here in the U.S., but in other countries, not necessarily so. In this country, we're seeing a little bit of tightening labor market. We're seeing rising interest rates. We're seeing certain things needed to slow things down. Not in China. China, completely the opposite way, okay? And in Russia, you mentioned Russia. To borrow John McCain's statement, Russia's basically a gas station with an army, okay? That was McCain was famous for saying that. So, he was right about that. But again, given what's happening right now, one thing you are seeing is other countries around the world starting to trade in things other than the dollar, okay?
Yep.
They're not trading in Chinese yuan. They're working within their own systems. And, the days, look, a country like ours, I don't care whether you're left or right, you cannot continue running multi-trillion-dollar deficits. At some point, people say, I'm not going to buy that debt anymore. And it becomes a debt problem. Like I mentioned the Chinese government. Local Chinese governments owe $13 trillion. Okay, now you say, Mark, wait a minute, the United States owes $32 trillion. I wasn't talking about the Chinese Communist Party. I was talking about local governments within China. Yes, we have a problem right now, meaning that our debt, roughly $32 trillion, it's about 70% above our GDP. Okay, that's not good. Typically, a balanced debt to equity on a country, 1.25, 1.2, even better would be debt equal to GDP. But we're way beyond that right now. And I see a lot of issues ahead with that, Tom. Depending on how things break, if the country and the markets go through this, quote, soft landing where, and look, you can criticize the Fed all you want, but they brought inflation down, but not to a level it needs to be. Think about this, and I'm going to come back to your populist question. All these people, the inflation hurts those at the bottom end of the income stream the worst.
Yes.
And inflation is a global event. It's not just in this country. It affects everybody.
Yes.
And I'll relate to that. But if you take people, and this is what drives me crazy, people that say, well, we're really doing good on inflation. It's down to like 3.5%. Yeah, but a year ago it was 9. Now you've tacked on 3.5 above that. The average guy or girl sitting here in a sub $60,000 income level, which is the overwhelming majority of people in this country, they're being affected by this. And when Biden goes out and gives a speech talking about, with 3.5% unemployment, and the same day his vice president is saying, 40 million people, or whatever the number she gave, or one paycheck away from being banked. That's a conflicting message. Yep. Okay, so not only does that happen, but this inflation gets exported. And one thing I saw in Asia, again, certain projects, big industrial building projects, nothing's happening because,
Yep.
we don't have free money anymore. It actually costs money, borrowing costs to do stuff now. So, Tom, this gets back to your populist question. If people begin to suffer economically, which is happening, and again, you may not like Trump, but that is his base. That is who he appeals to. The traditional Republican base of, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, I'm hating to, just Florida politicians, but the DeSantis of what people that have expounded traditional Republican values, they don't recognize part of this party. Similarly, on the Democratic side, it's become the party of the wealthy, the elite, the highly college educated, the people that seems that they think they know everything. And it was even talked about at the debate that that guy that looks like a country guy, and he had the #1 song on the charts, and he was talking about people in Washington. I mean, this stuff catches on to people, and they latch on to stuff. And so, do I have an answer for it? No, but I do know one thing. I mean, I do have an answer, but that's a whole new show. But I could talk about that. But as governments move left, and their population moves center-right populist, that's going to create a problem. And you add to that, in this country, the cognitive decline of the CEO of this country, you got a big problem brewing here. And I'm not sure the answer to that politically right now.
Yeah, I think that politically we have so many problems right now. And the problem is that, one of the things that I always say, just in business or just in life in general, is that I get how often something is important, right? And when people come to me and they ask for things like that, I get it that it's important. But what I'm always asking is, what is urgent? What requires my immediate attention? What is the target I've got to knock down before I can get, again, I'm not saying that you're not important. I recognize that, but you might not be urgent. The problem I have right now in the United States is there are so many things, and it's regardless of what political party you like, regardless of where we are. We've been talking about a lot of those things today. There are so many things that are urgent, and it seems like no one has an answer for them. And that, yes, I hope we find it, but it's just like, those are the things that give me the heebie-jeebies a little bit, not gonna lie.
I don't blame you there. Hey, let me get on to a couple other things here. I want to ask you a question, because we talk about these things all the time too. What is going on in your city? Okay, this mayor.
Which thing?
I mean, I used to read the Chicago murder report every Tuesday about what happened over the weekend. I gave up on it. It was such depressing news, and it never changed. The numbers are there every weekend. But now I saw a different number here today. Car thefts up 104% in the city of Chicago, and the mayor, instead of taking responsibility and say, "Hey, we have economic problems, we have minority problems, we have this, we have that," he takes to blaming the car companies because they don't have enough anti-theft devices on the car.
Oh, yeah.
Tom, you're in Chicago. What the hell is going on there?
So really ritzy neighborhoods where all the really expensive, I'm like the Fendis, the Pradas, the Gucci stores, like, the Richard Mille watches, which I know, like that's $250,000 watch minimum, like the really affluent places to shop, right? It borders right next to this neighborhood called the River North neighborhood and the Gold Coast, like right where they come together. That's where all this is, right? So right after the BLM and in the middle of COVID and stuff, there are smash and grab robberies that are going on in these truly elite, ultra wealthy stores over and over and over again. What did Lori Lightfoot say? She blamed the companies for not having enough security because she wouldn't send the cops. And we're like, that is quite literally the exact definition of what law enforcement is supposed to be stopping. What do you want? So to me, when I heard Brandon Johnson do that, I'm like, oh, it's just politics as usual in this city. But what it really does is that it really highlights a recognition of a problem and not having the courage and the authenticity to admit what the problem actually is. So it's that soundbite, that spin that's trying to get everyone away from something like that. When you really take a huge step back for it, it's like, this guy doesn't have a good answer to that problem. He knows all the economic and, racial inequality, like all the things that you just outlined. he knows how all that puts together to create a really volatile cocktail in certain areas of the city, or when those areas are unstable, that they will leave for, other places to try and do something. He knows all that, but he's never going to say it because that's just like the culture of Chicago politics. It's like, who can I blame that's like big and scary and has more money and all that other stuff? Like, like literally like Lightfoot's telling, Rolex that it's their fault that someone like smashed into their window, literally took a quickie saw to the steel thing that came down, like similar to what special operations people do. So they cut through that, ripped it all open, and it's so much time to do all that, they robbed the place blind. And just like, yeah, you guys should have had more security.
Well, until they start arresting these people and locking them up and throwing away the key, which they're not going to do in Chicago, and they're certainly not doing it in LA. Hell, they got no bail law out in LA, and you're seeing the same thing, the smash and grab. Hell, in San Francisco, they actually, Nordstrom, the flagship store, they closed. They said, we can't take it anymore. And that
worse than that, they closed, and immediately after that, Westfield, the big mall company, shut the entire mall down. They're like, we're all done. Whatever, you guys can solve this building here in the city of San Francisco. And like, to your point on that, it's like, look, I lean certainly a little, as a centrist, lean a little farther left than you do. And there are times where I'm like, okay, what is the social program here? Like, I really do think that there is a form of intelligent tax dollar spend that can elevate people out of poverty. I think education is super clear to that. I think we don't spend enough on it in this country. But what I will say is that San Francisco especially is the ultimate manifestation of trying to give someone a handout and thinking they're going to thank you for it. Yeah. And what no one seems to understand is human nature is you want an opportunity with sweat equity built into it. And honestly, if you're the 10% that really does want the handout, you're just going to sit there with it and ask me why I didn't come back the next week. Like, I'm not saying it's all easy, and there are certainly way more factors than just that simple thing. There's a lot more that goes into it, which, again, like we've been saying all show, that'd be another show. But just the basic 101 of it, no, people don't want handouts. People want opportunity. And what you're seeing in San Francisco, especially what you're seeing in LA, what you're seeing here in Chicago as well, is there's a lack of opportunity or a lack of perceived opportunity. And that's what drives a lot of this.
Well, and a lot of people are saying, no pun intended. I mean, you want to live in these type areas where you're seeing all this crime? Good for you. You be that Democrat that loves to live in the city. Feel the pain yourself. And Republicans are saying, I'd never want to live in there. So you get this big concentration of Democrats living in these areas. And what is synonymous with it? High crime, smash and grabs, lax bail laws, defund the police, all this stuff. And you're
no, I'm gonna tell on the Dems for a second on this one too, because I'm a centrist. I live in the actual city of Chicago. My zip code is 60613. Y'all can go look it up and see, roughly where I'm at in the city. I'm cool with that. I love living in the city. I know a lot of people that love living in the city, but you want to know what the secret is? Where all the Democrats that you're talking about, all the rich ones are, all the people that want to talk about one thing but aren't impacted by, I'm not talking about the people impacted by the hardship. I'm not talking about the South Side of Chicago. They all live around me, okay?
You're talking about liberal Democrats now. Yeah.
Right. My condo, okay, that I own, that I bought, that I worked really hard for, is in excess of $500,000. I'm not going any higher than that. It's a good number. It's more, but it's a good number to really explain the neighborhood that I live in, right? Okay. And you want to know what? None of those people, I mean, none of them, the people that I work out at the gym with, the people that I will see around at the local eateries and the local bars when I'm out with my partner and her and I, guess what? None of those people that want to talk all the trash that you and I are talking about right now go into the places where it's a problem. I've got friends that live close to that. I've got friends that are, very, very far left leaning and are very huge social advocates that put their money where their mouth is, quite literally by taking, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars less for what their work is in order to do what they think is the right thing. Okay. And honestly, good on those people. I've also seen a ton of people on the far right, especially when it comes to farming and things like that. This gets so lost with the liberal elite where they don't want to see it. Go out to rural America and see some really impassioned, sometimes far right, nonprofits and everything working for that specific cause. There are so many good people like that, but the people that you're talking about, hell no, man. They live in the city. They love the city. They're not living where those problems are. They're living around people like me. I'm just at least honest enough to go.
I know. They've got the security, and they got. I know. Right. I'm not being.
I work hard. I make a ton of money, and I'm not going to apologize for that.
You should have.
And that's where I'm at. But guess what? I also don't try to pretend I'm some elitist person who doesn't know it's 4 miles down the road.
Right.
Come on, man.
Right. Hey, speaking of that, now culture wars. we got to just touch on it briefly. Boy, I'm seeing these. I'm not shocked by this at all. It does seem like the right's fighting back. Modelo sales up 20%, Bud Light sales down another 20%. Boy, Tom, I mean, I'm not a culture war type guy. I don't like it on the left. I don't like it on the right. But it's there. It exists. Doesn't matter whether I like it. Half the country's on one side, the other half's on the other. Boy, what a debacle on the beer business.
Here's all I'm going to say about that, because I think this is the perfect encapsulation. Because you and I both hate this culture war stuff, right? Like there are times you have to speak about an issue and speak how that can affect someone if it's negative, right? At the end of the day, Kid Rock, Mr. Bob Ritchie himself, who's like blasting cans of Bud Light 6 weeks ago, gets caught last week just sipping on a Bud Light.
Really?
So clearly he must have meant it, right? Like clearly Kid Rock is still super upset about this transgender person who got a Bud Light. Like this is where the stupidity comes in. It's like, you know what? Like sometimes people are so quick, and the left does this too, but just because we're talking about this is, you know, you mentioned it, are so quick to get on their high horse of this perceived issue, of this perceived evil in society, regardless of side, right? And then suddenly, like any reasonable person like you and I, like to take one step back. It's just a reasonability standard when it comes to culture wars, in my opinion. Like, look, whatever you think about the hashtag Me Too, everyone can agree that Harvey Weinstein was a scumbag, and the world's a better place for him and people of his ilk being outed and being in jail, right? That's not a culture war thing. That is a cleaning up a societal problem. No one who's reasonable thinks that it matters one way or the other what person or people get put on a beer can and something who drinks the damn beer. Like,
if you don't like it, don't drink the beer. It's that simple. It is that simple.
As my mom used to tell my dad when he would get all like upset, you know, she would just look at me like, she'd be like, Francis, change the channel.
Right. Yeah, you don't like it, change. But unfortunately, we all go to our corners. We watch more of it. We want to get engaged.
Right. Yeah. 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 Right. It's just, I've never, Francis, change the channel. That's it. That's all you need to do.
Well, listen, I want to bring one other piece up, and I want to come back to China here, and then we'll close it out. She was in Turkestan area, Western China. Mm-hmm. Tom, there are some horrific things happening to the Uyghurs, the Muslims. I mean, people that are not, I'll use the term, purebred Chinese. She is effectively enslaving people. He has continued to erase a culture, if you will. There are people
not if you will. He is attempting to erase a culture.
He is attempting to erase a culture and makes no apologies for it whatsoever. Again, 9 out of 10 Americans don't even know what's going on over there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I want to sort of close it out, but the point is, there are some atrocities happening, from everything, organ transplants, where people didn't authorize it to happen, enslavement, I mean, just doing away with culture, imprisoning people. I mean, there's some horrific things happening. Unfortunately, and this, I don't blame our media, because it's, you know, to get to Western China and cover something, that's not the easiest thing in the world to do. Yes. But I think we have an obligation as part of the media to mention these things when she is prominently there yesterday, and it is not pretty. And unfortunately here in Southern California, Dr. Dana Churchill's been on the show before, who's a champion of these groups. Has led some fights against it. But boy, I got to tell you, when you take an authoritarian government like China has, like Xi, and you target an area, there's 3 million people involved here. Now you say, well, you know, China, they got 1 billion people. You know, 3 million of them are basically being eradicated, is the best word I can use, Tom. So
no, it's one of the things that bothers me about the concept that some people, and this is one of those places where, like, that super far right that really frustrates me sometimes, not the what I call the reasonable Republican. I've been using that phrase a lot lately, as I just in my life on both sides of the that isolationist, the young guy whose name I would murder if I tried to pronounce his last name. Was talking about, like, how we just need to be an isolationist state and not be the world's police officer. Like,
you're talking about a presidential candidate?
Yeah.
Oh, Vivek Ramaswamy?
Yeah, Ramaswamy. Okay, thank you for pronouncing that for me. I would have killed it. What everybody misses about that is what America means to the world, what it to the broader world. And I think like what we represent and why it is so important that if we want America to continue to be that we continue to stand up for things like this. Like, you want to know what it is to a certain level economically inconvenient to fight with China. And one of the things that I will say is that I don't think it's just about this issue, but I do have to give the Biden administration credit for the very aggressive economic sanctions as it comes to technology and it comes to reducing those things. When it comes to seeing what happened in the Ukraine, knowing, and I got to give Europe, the EU credit for this too, knowing what it was going to do, the economic hits that they were going to take, but going right after Russia. Okay, like if we want to continue to be, the greatest nation in the world, and if we want to continue to be, for all of America's imperfections, we still have to talk about these. We still have to shine a light on these things. We still have to acknowledge, because we're coming up on 2 days away, it will be the 2-year anniversary, the failures that we had in Afghanistan. And I was one of the veterans that tried to get people out of there. How we just gave away a place that we had been to an authoritarian state for no other reason. And this is where I will murk Biden for, just because, I wanted a press release to say that I left at the 20-year mark. That was it. That's why we left Afghanistan, when we did and how we did. And so, yes, it is required if you want to be an American. I'm sorry, but this is the burden of being an American, in my opinion. And it can be a burden sometimes. Is to respect how good we have it. For all the problems we have, as much as we want to argue and all these things, and we've been a little more negative on the show today than we sometimes are, a little more frustrated with the problems we see. It doesn't change the fact that you've been to Vietnam, you've been all over the world, just like I have. I have been into so many developing countries and I have been to those places. America is the greatest nation in the world, period. And if you want to stay that, if we want to continue to be that, we have to understand that we do have a responsibility in the world sometimes to go, nope, stop it. Nope, that is not good for the world, because it's not good for what it can cause.
Right.
And do we spend a little too much money on that sometimes? Yeah, I think we do. Are there other things, but it doesn't change. We cannot go just stick our head in the sand so far down in the sand, it might as well be up our butt. Okay, right. We have got to continue to do exactly what you're saying, is call these things out and talk about these things. Otherwise, we will forget even more so about what it means to be American, what actually it makes us the greatest nation in the world. So I'm totally with you.
Well, I tell you what, I got about 30 seconds left. I'm going to leave it at that, Tom, because that's a good epilogue to sort of end it with. But you're exactly right. And every time I come back to the U.S. from on a foreign trip, I feel great, because for all the issues that we have, and we, as Americans, we like to fight, we like to debate, we like to talk about these things. But why do we do that? Because we want a better union, not a worse union. And again, the political divide may be huge, but there's certain things that most Americans, other than those on the fringes, generally support. And that's generally, it's not just 60%, it's probably 80% of Americans support those ideals. Tom,
I agree.
Tom, thank you again for sticking with me today. Your views, your insights, always valuable, and it's a pleasure having you on.
Always good to be on with you, brother.
Okay, folks, we'll be back in a couple days. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening today. Cut through the propaganda. See you on Thursday.